Welcome back, everyone, to the show. I am very, very excited to introduce you to a woman whose reputation is pretty stellar. And once you hear our interview today, you will understand why I have invited her to come on this podcast. Her name is Pamela Slim. You likely already know her, but if you don't, for some reason, you'll be glad that you listened in because she's an award winner. She's an award-winning author, speaker, and business coach who works with small business owners ready to scale their business and IP. She is the author of Escape from Cubicle Nation, which was published by Penguin Portfolio in 2009, Body of Work, which was also published by Penguin Portfolio in 2014, and The Widest Net, which was published by McGraw Hill in November 2021. Pam and her husband, Darryl, co-founded the Community Lab in Mesa, Arizona, where they host scores of diverse community leaders and regular small business programming. I know we're going to be chatting about a lot of fun things today. So welcome to the show.
I am so happy to be here.
So I was making sure I was pronouncing the body of work that you have and all the services that you have, and you were mentioning it's Navajo.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that, first of all. And how long has that been in operation, and what was your intention for creating that?
So my husband is Navajo, so hence he named the space, and we have been here for 7 years. We opened in 2016, and it was the culmination of a couple of things. I had done research for my last book, The Widest Net, traveling to 23 different cities, sharing the model that was the foundation for the book. I called it the Unbook Tour, with a wink to my friend Scott Stratton, a great Canadian marketer who writes about unmarketing. And it really was the chance to explore with many entrepreneurs I'd worked with before in previous book tours, the idea and see what resonated that was helping to shape the book. On that tour, from the very first stop, I happened to ask at the first stop, how many of you have ever seen a Native American business presenter presenting at a business conference on a business topic? And after 23 cities and over 1,000 people, only 7 people ever had. 4 of them were in Vancouver, Canada, one of my stops. And so when I came back, my husband had been a longtime business owner for many decades. He ran a heavy equipment construction business. He built a lot of our Phoenix metro area housing developments and roads and all that. And so we knew the issue wasn't that they weren't there. There are many, many, many Native American entrepreneurs, but there was no visibility. And so when we came back, we really decided to open a space that does house our offices, and also could be a place where we really just hosted and highlighted the leadership that exists but is rarely seen. And my own experiment with myself was to utilize all the principles from the Widest Net, which is a way that you can, through the lens of an ecosystem, build a community, build a business, engage with people. And so I used every single principle that I wrote about in the book, and was really happy to say we created an extremely vibrant, thriving place where many, many, many beautiful things have come from it. People opening their own spaces and own brick and mortar businesses, as well as a lot of other things locally.
I wish that wasn't the reality based on what you just described, but I totally believe that to be true. It occurs to me, I know we're all of us listening get this to the degree that we can get this. I think that what we're going to see in this decade of business until, well, like hopefully beyond that, but definitely this from 2020 to like 2030, we're just not going to be able to ignore how much representation or lack of representation we have in our companies and on our platforms, and how we're serving and speaking to diversity in our communities. Like and if we're a service-based people and we're all about helping people, like that should already be a given. Like why would that even be something that would surprise us to be focusing on?
That's right. And it is, to me, it's just, I love the idea. There's a term, underrecognized entrepreneurs, from Nobi Works, who's an amazing branding expert. And she says, when we think about it that way, that leadership exists, market exists, amazing entrepreneurs that have not been recognized, not underrepresented, but really underrecognized. the opportunity for me, and that really the underlining of what I always talk to people about from this perspective, is it makes your life so much richer, so much more interesting. It makes your business so much healthier when we really build relationships with people who are in our environment, and really doing it from the perspective of highlighting leadership that exists, and from folks, many of whom have been really systemically ignored. Here in Canada, I know you have your own history with First Nations. Here in the US, there's really a principle of invisibility. There was like actual governmental policy to, as they said, kill the Indian in the child on one case for taking kids from their families and stripping their language and their hair and their culture. And then on the other side, to not recognize the fact that people were here, our whole manifest destiny, kind of approach. So when you think about that there was a policy of invisibility, for me, it gives me a lot more energy and excitement for doing what I can to simply lift the veil, right? And say, look at these amazing folks. So I spend a lot of time here downtown in our local community. I call myself a professional, busybody, where I learn about what's happening. I know everybody, and I'll say, oh, you need a speaker for this event. Oh, there's a project coming up. Let me make sure that we have these folks that are bidding on it. And really from a theory of change perspective, so often what I find often very well-intentioned entrepreneurs that are, white like me, may immediately want to approach the issue maybe where there aren't so many people represented in their communities by saying, let me start a program to teach them how to be entrepreneurs or leaders. And my point is, they have everything they need already. The issue is not that they're not capable, it's that they have been systemically invisible. So that has been a really important principle that I think about in many, many ways as a starting place for working with clients that I have that are very diverse, and also having conversations here locally about it.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're sharing that. And Pam, you don't know this because we haven't chatted about this. Many of you do. You've probably heard me share. So I grew up, my grandparents were foster parents to First Nations kids. Back then they were called Indians. That's what we were, and back in the 70s and 80s. And so they were my, essentially my brothers and sisters, because I grew up with them. And so I remember being a kid, not that I had language for it, but I remember finding it interesting that society and the systems really made First Nations people seem dumb and dirty. They went out of their way to really create societal programming around that. And so, as we know, there's a ton of intelligent people of all different creeds and races and stuff, right? But when you're pummeled constantly with their dirty, disgusting, and by the way, alcoholics and therefore unreliable and having their hand out and all this, like, obviously crap, I can see why people would approach that. I'm not saying it's right, but I can see why people would approach, let's say, in your case, Native American, in our case, First Nations, and come at it from the place of, let us show you how to do it. Let us teach you. From my perspective, if you want to meet a really resourceful person, go and hook up with someone that has been intentionally marginalized on the planet, and find out who's more resourceful, you or that person, kind of thing, right? Because by circumstance, a lot of people have had no choice but to try and outcreate the system and outcreate the systemic nonsense, essentially, right? So I just love that you're doing that. And even in hearing this, because I hear my own stuff in it too, like I think at one point it's easy to kind of go, okay, well, how do I find people that are of different, how can I be more representative in who I showcase on podcasts or summits or whatever? Where am I going to find them? It's not, like you said, it's not that they're not out there, but it actually requires more of us to go and do the research and to go and do the sleuthing and so on, right? Instead of being like, well, I couldn't find it, so therefore I couldn't do it, right?
That's right. Or it can be that thought of, oh, I asked once and, somebody didn't respond. One good principle that I think about a lot for those folks who might do local work. So if you have a brick and mortar facility in your local community, or where you're doing work online, like I do, working with people all over the world, when you look in any dimension of your business, you might say, who are my clients? And then you can ask yourself, who is here, who is not here, and why aren't they here? First, it's good to look at certain patterns, and you might notice, oh, okay, I have a lot of clients that come from this background and not that one. And then put it through the lens of evaluation for your business. In some cases, you might say, good on me. I've been very deliberate in who it is that I am wanting to work with. So for example, in the dimension of people that come from a different business background or have a certain business challenge that you love solving, you can say, I did a great job at being very specific about who I was attracting. And then you might find other things where you say, wow, I don't have any Black women clients, or I don't have any trans clients. And I wonder why that is. The thing about answering the last part of the question of why aren't they here is, if they're not there, it is unlikely that we have the answer. Because we've probably sometimes unintentionally, sometimes intentionally put up barriers around it. So that's exactly, as you said, where you can begin this process of investigation, curiosity, and exploration, where you can begin just to spend time at first learning more, about who's in your local community. Find places, I call them watering holes from my book, The Widest Net, places that can be in person or online, who have a large amount of people maybe who you're liking to connect with. And the first entire part of the process, you might know from, the siblings that you grew up with. I know, and even in the relationship, I've been with my husband for 20 years, but even in the relationship with my family, it takes a long time of just showing up, being quietly present, being helpful. For example, going to an event where, in this case, maybe you're the only white person, if that's your identity, and you can feel that sometimes discomfort, of being the person who's the other in that environment, but approach it from a perspective of humility, trying to be of service, be of help. I always say, if you are an entrepreneur, before you're saying, hey, would you come into my mastermind or my program because I want to work with more folks from your community, you might say, what are you doing? How could I support? Do you need a sponsor for an event that you have coming up? Let me support what it is that you're doing. And in the business arena, that's often a really good way that you can start to show up and provide support. But there's a whole process that I call listen first, which is really just leaning in to understand, who is there. And we talk about, identity, cultural background, people from different communities as one dimension, but it also can be really interesting where you might discover interesting areas for you. We're like, why don't I have any tech entrepreneurs? I love tech. Like, that would be so exciting. What are ways that I can start to spend some time in areas that are watering holes for those folks? And then you end up having a much more well-rounded community and audience in your business.
I'm so grateful for those questions. So just to recap for everyone, because it's occurring to me, that's a very, there's such simple questions to even put on a sticky note and have at our computer, or if we have one of those whitey boards in our office that we're always sort of, moving org charts or program development or whatever. If we have the who's here, who's not here, and why are they not here? And then of course the bonus question is, well, where am I going to go put myself in the position to start connecting with folks, not from a place of let me rescue you, but hey, how can I collaborate with you, or how can I support your event or your, et cetera, et cetera. So I love that. I really, really appreciate that nudge. And I know that that's not the entirety of what you do, but as I mentioned, I have a soft spot for that. So hearing that you've created something to really showcase the high level of resourceful and uber intelligent people in the Native American community, right? I know you do more than that, but I mean, that being a community that we know is really systemically, they're up against a lot of systems, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's right. And it's an extremely diverse set of people. So here in the US, we have 562 federally recognized tribes. You have all kinds of different experience. You have people with PhDs, graphic designers, insurance brokers, and then you have folks who might grow up more on the reservations, who have a different, life experience. So it's just this huge, diverse, interesting kind of community. So yeah, it's really wonderful. It's been a great experience.
I love this idea about the watering holes and so on. And I know that's a big part of casting a wider net and your concept of doing that. And I know that one of the other things you really love helping entrepreneurs focus on, and it really ties into the work we do here on the Seven Figure Club podcast, is around really being mindful of your IP and building it as an asset and being super intentional around it. And so for those people listening, they know I built an 8-figure company with my IP, very unintentionally, by the way. It's not like I ever had any grand plan, but now that I have that and it's sustainable, and if I were to sell my company, which I'm not, people get worried when I say that, I'm not going to sell it, but if I were to, it's going to hold its value because the IP is independent of me having to deliver it, right? And it's something that's attached to the company. So I'll let you take it away, but what are the common things people overlook when it comes to developing IP that actually can stand the test of time?
Yeah, so in the big picture, a way to think about it, most of my clients are professional service providers, so doctors, lawyers, consultants, coaches, folks like that, who solve usually business problems, sometimes personal health, wellness kinds of problems for a living. And so when we think about a service business, we tend at first in the earlier stages of business to think about us showing up with our unique magic, experience, training, et cetera. And very often meeting with clients, having a very hands-on custom experience where we're working with them to help solve problems. And a lot of it is literally dependent on the energy we bring, the experience we bring, solving problems in the moment when we're having conversations or creating custom solutions to projects. In the life cycle of a service business, you go through first that area of just figuring out, is there an area of specialization? Most people early on are just, how can I keep food on the table and work for myself if they've left corporate, for example, which are a lot of folks I worked with in the first stage of my business a number of years ago. But at first, once you get grounded, you deliver very reliable services and you do begin to develop some kind of a specialty area, then you want to look to codify. So of all the things I'm doing, what are ways that somebody besides me, the founder of the business, could be doing it? And that's where you begin to see the skeleton and the architecture of your IP and your method. I'm so excited that you fell into that. Most people don't fall into an 8-figure business, so I think you're amazing. So, I know there was a lot of very hard work and strategic focus. It doesn't happen without that. But as the principal, it sounds like you really modeled that principle of once you do begin to identify, this is a problem in the market that there is a market for, people are willing to pay money to solve it. I love to solve it. It's part of my core strengths and expertise. And then you begin to codify, what is my approach? How do I do it? What are models and methods that can really represent solving that problem? And really, you need to develop it to the extent that other people can come in and do it. And there's different ways in which that model gets scaled. So for some clients we work with, it's through licensing content, a pure licensing agreement. Sometimes it has a bit of a train the trainer. Sometimes there's certification path that I work on in my agency of building a certification. People could be certified to use your method in their own business, or some people use that certification path to really have a very strong kind of orientation and training for people if they're going to grow their own staff, for example. But with that, once that you have codification and you're wanting to go to more scale, then you start to look at building more of your connections in your community and really growing through, in my lens, it's through the Widest Net, which is an approach to building your business that is looking, if you identify who your ideal client is. So I'm curious, how do you identify your ideal client? Who's somebody perfect for you?
I have limited, I'm actually not as robust in that, but I have things like they need to be emotionally and spiritually mature. That's important to me. They have to have a high degree of emotional, spiritual, and leadership IQ. And then after that, they have to, not everyone's used to investing in themselves probably the way you and I are. So that's not necessarily a criteria, but if they're going to invest, I need them to joyfully pay me. I don't want to hear the story of all the things they had to do and all of the things they had to sell and I don't want anyone to go broke anyways. I actually refuse to take on clients if they're going to go into debt to come into a program. I'm not that coach that's going to take them on, but that's just me. But you get what I'm saying, where people are like, I just need you to know I had to sell my grandmother's, thing I inherited. And I'm like,
no, I'm with you.
Right.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And then additionally, even if I apply who I would work with as a business client, like, I'm not interested in just helping people make money. I need to know, are you making, like, do you really like to help people? Do you really like your clients? Do you have something that's already helping people and I can just help you, do it even more? Now, that's just the business coaching thing, right? For the actual certification that I have, that's for anyone that's wanting to learn to read the Akashic records, either just for their own personal use, maybe family and stuff, or they're actually wanting to bring it into their business as a paid offering and really learn how to do that, right? So we have different tracks for that.
I love that. So interesting in having some different audience segments, like solving different problems for different people through different ways. Part of the way that I listen for it when we think about growing your audience with some of that criteria. So some of it's the business criteria of knowing people who would want to be bringing, your specialty area into their business, or businesses that have those affective characteristics of really, having, as you said, spiritual, emotional EQ. You can begin to look, I always think about, there's an ecosystem that's surrounding that ideal person where they're already attending events, they are doing training, they're listening to podcasts, they are utilizing products to solve the problem that you also can help them solve. And so one thing I always think of is just sort of a fun idea that always springs to mind is maybe you notice that there's certain kinds of training programs around spiritual health or emotional, EQ, that people who are graduates of that program would be a great fit for you because you recognize the rigor they go through. And in that way, probably you and that organization share the same kind of avatar and criteria. So when you're building an audience, if you think about it, for you to show up in that watering hole, so you could go to the, International Association of Emotionally Mature People, right? Obviously a hypothetical group, but you're some kind of training program for EQ, and you go and you do a presentation there, literally all of that alignment has already happened through that positive, I call it the peanut butter and jelly connection, that highly complementary but non-competitive kind of relationship. Yeah. So as you're beginning to look at that, or you notice, people at a certain stage of business use this software. So why don't I go and speak at the software company's conference? Most of the software companies have big conferences where when you're there, you're connecting again to another part of your ideal client's ecosystem. So it's a strategic way. I know you always have to have a bit of a little tongue in cheek, a bit of a big promise. And in the title for the Widest Net, some people say, what are you saying, Pam? You just throw seeds anywhere and just reach out anywhere. To me, you first have to visualize all of the possibilities about where your ideal clients are in the ecosystem that already surrounds them, communities they're already part of. And then strategically you choose which of those are the best fit for you to very tactically begin to build relationships and connections. I call it build tiny marketing actions. And so it's like going out real big, visualizing the market, zeroing in to see the places where they already are. And with that, knowing you've already gone through this process, you're clear in your specialty area, you begin to really codify. When you show up in those places, you are a very vital person to that audience because you're showing up with a specific point of view, thought leadership. And then where you have things really well organized in your business, they have a clear path and way that they can understand how to work with you. And so from that is where you go into that final step of scaling, where you do figure out more of your marketing operations, your partnerships, the kind of ongoing activities that you can build in order to make sure that you have a really good steady flow of clients. For folks that might be primarily online, it's where you build a lot of really powerful SEO content. If you have the kind of business where people are often searching for what it is that you have to deliver. But that's the way that you think about this big picture of how first your IP, that method, the models, the actual documents that you're building are directly related to a market that's really rich. And then from that, you take on the marketing activities that give you the kind of strategic partnerships to help it grow. So to me, that's the part that if you look at any potential point of failure for most service businesses, it's where the founders, who usually are very excited about the creative process, if anything were ever to happen to them, the whole business could start to fall apart because there's not delegation, there's not codified IP, there's not certification programs in order to have other people who can deliver it. So that's the way that I look at it strategically.
Mhm. It's occurring to me because I know you're saying people are looking at you like, what do you mean? That's a big net. And all I hear when you're talking, now granted, I think we're probably cut from the same cloth because I'm a connector by nature. Like that's my biggest archetype, I would say, and it sounds like it is for you. So it's
Mhm.
easy for you to connect the dots and be like, oh yeah, well, if I'm doing this, then I'm gonna look at that whole ecosystem and look at all the other dots I can plug and play. And your brain's probably already wired to, I know this person, I've got to connect them to this person and stuff. And so I get it. And I'm listening to you going, oh my God, you get it. Like your brain can just see it all. Almost like a big, like back in the old day, like those telecom boards, right? Where you can see all the plugs and you just know where to put it all. A lot of people's brain doesn't work that way. And so for those of you that are listening to this going, I still don't understand. I don't know where, Pam is the person to help you. Like you don't want to judge yourself for that because your zone of genius will be in something that I don't have as an example or whatever, right? But that really is important because, as you well know, everything about business is relationship, and so relationship does require some connection, and there's some things that need to be and it's not even that people don't want to connect, they literally don't have the way that their brain organizes information or implements information is just not wired the same way.
It's exactly right. And it's the reason why I created a method around it, because I always say I'm an author practitioner. I don't just usually come up with an idea in the shower. I focus on the work that I'm doing with clients and begin to notice, oh my gosh, exactly as you said, I see it. I could walk into a room immediately and just have an entire ecosystem visualization in my head. That's that example of I might hold those strengths. But until I take it out of my head and really make a method for people who don't have that as a natural strength, then it just becomes something that I physically have to do with clients every time. And so as I look at my own history of writing and books, I was a management consultant for the first 10 years of my business in Silicon Valley. And then when I just moved to Arizona, fell in love with my husband and decided to move here, we wanted to have kids. That's where I shifted into coaching. And what I had seen so much in my time as a management consultant is that there were so many people who were like pulling me aside and saying, how did you do it? How did you quit your corporate job to start a business? And so that's what started my first idea for Escape from Cubicle Nation, realizing that people didn't know some of the foundations of specifically leaving a very solid, successful corporate career for entrepreneurship. So that was the first book. Then I figured out, after doing that work for a long time, that people were saying you can only be creative and free if you work for yourself. I thought that's a very limited way of looking at the world. What about people who have nonprofits or university professors or the people who work with you in your entrepreneurial business? Are you saying that they're not cool, creative, and free because they don't have their own business? So that's why I wrote Body of Work, to focus on how do you think about what you create through your body of work that can be work mode agnostic. At some stages of your life, you may love to work for yourself. And then maybe you go through a different stage, like sometimes happens with clients, where they get excited about joining a VC firm or starting a nonprofit or doing something else. And so that really is what came out of Body of Work. And then I found clients that were excited about getting deliberate about what they were creating were like, okay, where's my audience? How in the world do I find these people? So that's the way that I tend to look at it. And it's a good way for folks listening who are in professional services where you're just spending all your time usually going in and solving problems really quickly for your clients. But pay attention and write down, what are the common questions that you have? Are there any approaches, analogies, metaphors, models that you create that your clients find are really interesting? And that's usually the grist when I'm doing bigger strategic work with folks or figuring out what their first book or next book will be. It's usually really looking in that experience of what is your unique point of view about solving the problem that you love to solve with your clients. And that's thought leadership. This is your approach to how you would help your client to solve their problem. Because that we need all of us. Like, I'm so glad you're there doing the work that you're doing. I can never provide all the services that my clients need in order to be successful. Some of them work with other business coaches. graphic designers, IP attorneys, you just the therapists. I don't know if your clients do. I'm always like having fun, they're like, okay, time, this is a question for your therapist. And their therapist is saying, hey, you better talk to Pam, your business coach, about this. So we really need each other to be surrounding our clients. The metaphor, I don't know if people like movies, but I think about the Justice League. So if we were to say, if we were just to solve all the problems for our clients, and we were to choose the very best people from every functional area that they need to be successful, that should be the ecosystem that we surround ourselves with. Those should be the people that we're talking to every day. And because we have highly complementary but non-competitive products and services, then it's helpful for us to all do a better, kind of have a more holistic view. And in many ways, very often, I have many friends who actually are direct competitors. In some cases where a client might be talking to each of us, but because we know we're on the same mission of ultimately just trying to solve the problem for our client, it can just be like, hey, whoever is that particular prospective client feels the best with is who we want them to work with, because we know they'll be taken care of, because that's really linked to what our mission is. So it's a more relational way of looking at of getting the work done. And to me, it really does put us in a higher level of design, of strategy, so that we really see the big picture. But then it allows us to focus on our particular slice of the pie that's our specialty area.
It occurs to me as you're sharing that you have to have done a certain, any person, I mean, right, has to have done a certain level of work on themselves. And I also feel it's a wealth consciousness thing. I do feel like when we get to a certain level of income where we've calibrated to it, right, where we kind of create resonance with that emotional intelligence that's present for like a 7-figure earner, as an example. I'm aware I have competitors. I don't view them as competitors. I actually don't. I'm more than happy to network with people that do the exact same thing as me. It does it because I know that client, and I actually think it's easier, even if clients don't end up coming with you, I think it's still easier for them to refer business to you when they don't feel the pressure and they can see the maturity and like they can see the collaborative energy, right? But I do feel like, hey, we know this is the collaboration economy anyways. So if we're still in this competition, scarcity, it's mine, my client, all this grabby energy, it's you're going to attract a certain type of person, I guess, right? If you're in that energy. But I'm not surprised to hearing you speak this way, because I also know you're very financially successful in your company and so on, right? So that if it's been my experience that when people claim that they're at a certain level, but there's certain things they'll say where I'm like, ooh, that doesn't match, right? I have yet to meet a 7-figure plus earner that's like super grabby around business and like trying to body check their competitors and stuff like that, right? Because I'm like you, sometimes there's clients I can't say yes to, meaning maybe we're not jiving, maybe I'm too full with something, maybe there's expectations they have where I'm like, I could serve them, but I actually think, Pam in this instance might be better serve them, that kind of thing. So when we lead with service, and that's been a huge part of my success, I know the same is true for you, then if service is always running the show, then it's kind of easy to do that. But I do agree with you that from a collaborative perspective, because not everyone operates that way, it is easier, at least in the beginning, like what you're describing, when you're first creating these ecosystems, to go and chat with people that are serving your ideal client, but you're complementing each other as opposed to offering the exact same thing. Right. I do think it's an easier yes for collaborators to say yes to those kind of deals.
That's right, because there's a different purpose. And I think there's a really clear and strong purpose for collaborating with folks that come from your profession, more from a community of practice. And the filter to me always is values. So it doesn't mean that because there are a whole bunch of people that could do the same kind of thing that you do, whether you're a consultant or business coach or a lawyer. I think to have somebody strong in your circle that you feel good about referring clients to, having shared values or at least complementary values is a really clear part of it. So that is one piece. If we think of all of the potential people in the world and in the ecosystem who are providing services, the one that becomes very specific to the way that you look at partnership are folks who share values, because we want our ideal clients to be connecting with our values. And then when we do introduce them to somebody else to work with, we don't want them to have a totally different experience or say, gosh, that was so weird. Like, why did you send me to, to this person? Because I had a totally different experience than working with you, Pam or Jennifer. And so with that as a dimension, there is that beautiful work that we do in a community of practice where we can really help push each other and say, gosh, do you run into this one problem? I don't know how to help people with pricing models or the emotion of, making more money and dealing with it, whatever the issue is. We can really help each other in our areas of specificity. And then I think in more our PB&J partners are highly complementary, non-competitive. Those are really those healthy channels where we can just be bringing fresh water into the business, where there's a very natural referral process. I'm big about operations, of really codifying, operationalizing things so that we have an understanding and can measure and predict. We never know exactly what's going to happen, right? There's external forces outside of our control, but there really are quite a few things that we can do to make sure that we are highly visible in the watering holes where we know our ideal clients are. We can be very deliberate with how we might design collaborations or referrals in a way that make it super easy for us to be sending business back and forth. And so with that, I think you really push the odds towards success. And then you can just be deliberate about how it is that you're spending time when you do want to have clients, and be in a case where you're doing business development to get more clients. I used to laugh. I did a lot of work with coaches in the early years of my business and coach organizations, and people would be saying, "Gosh, it's such a rough market out there. Like, I just keep going to these events and I'm not finding anybody." And I say, "Well, what events are you going to?" And they might say, "Oh, it's a coaching convention and it's the Association of Coaches." I'm saying, what you're doing is you're staying in this one environment where there's a whole bunch of people that have the same objective of you of getting clients. In the meantime, there are probably 7 continents worth of people that don't even know what a coach is. And coaches in that environment just see everybody else with all these offers because that's their entire world that they're seeing every day on social media.
Totally.
And so I say, be the weirdo in the room, go to a place where you're the only coach or consultant in a room filled with data scientists or whatever is the area, because then you're not going to have that same level of competition.
I'm laughing because just recently someone asked me what I did, and I thought, well, the easiest thing for me to do is say that I'm a life coach. And they're like, and so one of their first questions was, "Oh, how often do you go to tournaments?" Because they hear the word coach and they think, they just got confused and thought, I agree with you. Even when we're living and breathing it, we just assume everyone knows, right? But you're right. There are literally millions of people on this planet still that have no idea that a coach, like a life coach or a business coach or anything, is even a thing. And I mean, I was in business for 5 years, totally investing in sharpening my saw. Had no idea. And I don't know if you can speak to this, but I know from any successful person I speak with, they always say to me, they wish they had hired their coach sooner. I didn't even know that a business coach was a thing until 5 years in.
I think it really is. It depends on who the person is, what the business is. If it's somebody who, for example, is leaving a corporate job within an area of specialty. So maybe they're a finance person and they're doing finance consulting. For some people, there's that bridge that brings them right into the market where they can, that was actually my case. I was the director of training and development at Barclays Global Investors, a financial services firm, 27 years ago, my last real job. And so when I left, I was in Silicon Valley in the late 90s, really, really busy growth time. So it was so easy for me to fall into immediately making more than I ever made as an employee because I already had a network and I was in my focused area. The parts often that I didn't know, that many clients didn't know in that case, was how do I actually structure the business, and how do I get an LLC set up, and all those things that can be for the early stage. For other people, when you think of making a major shift, so you've been a doctor and now you want to be a life coach, and I've definitely seen that in my career, that can be often where you're navigating through so many different things. You really do need somebody to help you out. So it's one of the things I've seen since I started my business so many years ago. I mean, I didn't know. I was shocked that I would be successful because I was a liberal arts major. My degree was actually community development, international community development, looking at non-formal education as a tool for social and economic change, which is so hilarious because that's actually what we're doing now here. So much of the model that I built has been around that model, but I didn't really consider myself a business person. But I had life experience that helped me to really understand, big picture kind of connections that was good in the early stages. I feel as adamant as you do about our responsibility for those of us that are professional coaches to help people to make good, discerning investment decisions. And I agree, it's always, for many people, it's going to be so much easier to have somebody to provide support, structure, ideas and resources when they're doing something new. And I see a lot of predatory activity in the coaching arena, like you said you have, that just makes me sick to my stomach, where the message is like, you will never be successful unless you invest in my $50,000 mastermind. And for somebody who might be just starting out, that's actually a terrible decision unless they are independently wealthy and they choose to spend their money that way and they can see the specific return. It's not really about the dollar amount. It's about helping to understand what actually do they need and how can we really match our services with that. But I always tell my clients, potential clients, part of the way, and it sounds like we're aligned in this, part of what allows me to do my strategic work is where they're in a place where investing in the services is not going to be a financial hardship. They can see the specific return. They're ready to do the work. They have more of a growth mindset of, and I always say it's a bonus if they like to laugh and they like to swear, because that just means we're going to have a lot of fun together. But we look at a lot of formulas, and I know in your world, what it means if you're a 7-figure entrepreneur, an 8-figure entrepreneur, it totally depends on how you approach it. It totally depends on what your values are. I have seen people massively financially successful and miserable, with like total churn and burn on their team. I've seen people with a super lean, minimalist business that are blissed out doing their best work in a much more of a smaller footprint. So that's where you have to really know what it is that you want to grow. And not everybody necessarily wants to scale, which is where I say, for some people, they want to really stay in that specialization, codification stage, make your business really smooth operationally, support yourself with clear structures. If that's the way that you want to run a business, that can be really great and it can be really powerful. But where folks begin to really want to see more impact, and also often the revenue that comes with it, is where you just really want to be deliberate about how you make those choices to grow.
I love that you share that. Yeah, agreed. So just to recap for everyone, what you just shared is that, go and find the person that's created the business model and the structure that matches the lifestyle you want to have, the hustle or the lack of hustle that you want to have, maybe the income level, who knows, right? But there's someone out there that's already done it. And so why would you recreate the wheel when you can just hire someone to give you the shortcuts to create, your own version of that? And, there's so much we can talk about, Pam. And I mean, I want to have you come on all the time. So you're going to be bombarded with invites for me. I will say, because I know that we're going to be wrapping up soon. And part of what we do on this show is to give people the inner and outer strategies to create 7 figures or add 7 figures, right? Depending on where all of you are at. And so hopefully it's become clear that one of the things that Pam can help you with in her agency is help if you might already have IP that's packaged up and so on, and maybe you just need to really get some eyeballs on how to monetize that, to like this as your low-hanging fruit that you just want to monetize exponentially. Maybe you didn't even consider a licensing deal. Maybe, there's various things, but let's take what you have in your business and exponentialize it and have it make you a lot of money to create more impact and hire more people and whatever else you want to do, give back, et cetera, et cetera. But additionally, I will say that one of the easiest ways to leap from one income level to another is to really package up your IP and either create a certification with a whole monetization plan in it and or a licensing path. And that's something that you can, I mean, I'm already thinking, crap, there's some licensing deals I need to start taking a look at. Guess who I'm going to call, right? And so I would say one outer one major, actually very significant outer strategy, and you've all heard me share, I created, very unintentionally created an 8-figure company from really building out my IP and creating a whole, monetization structure around that. But I'd love to hear from you, Pam, before we wrap up. What's a major inner shift that you needed to make in order to leap into 7 figures?
For me, it's being deliberate, I think, at any stage of business. And I have taken probably an unconventional path, I think, in my own journey as an entrepreneur, of primarily being driven by ideas, being an author, really looking at big idea books, and having a very specific approach at different stages of my own life and body of work. For example, the last 7 years of really focusing deliberately on investing in our local community is a very deliberate example sometimes of how money is not my primary driver. At that stage of life, I usually go through 7 to 10 year cycles of focusing on work and then having a transition. In this latest iteration, what is so exciting to me about really the path that's opening up in building an agency is I am so excited by the work, and anybody who's been a coach for a long time or a consultant will understand. I'm so excited to have other people who are actually more talented than me. For people who are building our programs, we have the best team in the universe. And whereas I've always had folks I've worked with in my team, now I really saw like where the IP, are my own methods, have really been built, along with my business partner, Darryl Padilla. And so in partnering and building the team, now my greatest joy is how I can keep that team happy, working, really doing business development. And I do a portion of my work as a business advisor, more in my business coaching. That's still a slice of my business. But now I really see the possibility of scaling it where it doesn't mean that I have to physically be doing the work. I love to be a coach. My clients are so amazing, and I feel so thankful to do the work with them. And I'm at a stage of life and business. I just dropped off my son at college this week. His first year of college. Our daughter is a couple of years behind. So I have a different driver and a vision for both impact through our work and also for income. So that, I think, is my biggest piece of advice: of it's okay to have a different focus of your life, priorities, based on what it is that you want to build. And then when you really do get ready to see that vision of how you can be earning that money, that's where I say, as much as possible, let the IP work for you, because you're never going to get there. You'll probably burn yourself out if you just try to work harder and more, or just continue elevating your prices to the state where it actually becomes a pressure for you to be delivering to a market that where it may be too much of a stretch for them, or you just price yourself out of the market.
Mm-hmm. I love that you shared that. Yeah. If I'm hearing you correctly, it's like really making the choice to step out of your zone of competence and really stay in your zone of genius, and then hire people that are, equivalent, if not even smarter than you, so to speak, right? In the areas that can complement your zone of genius, and really, and from the ego perspective, being okay with that, because not everyone can from an ego perspective, right? Like, obviously that requires a level of emotional and leadership maturity, which clearly you have in spades, right? Like, exponentially. I know you have to go, Pam, but can you quickly let everyone know, and we're going to put this all in the show notes for you guys, how can people find you, and what's the best way for them to stay in touch with you?
Yes, you can find me at pamelaslim.com, and we have a contact page right there on the website. If anybody is curious about the licensing and certification services, you can just go to the licensing page under services, and that's where we also have a hour-long webinar that we did for people that might just kind of be a mystery of knowing what's involved. You can just go right there on the page and check it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to put all of Pam's contact information and so on in the show notes. So we've got you. Don't worry about it if you're driving or working out right now and you don't have a pen and paper. So Pam, thank you so much. I can't wait to have you back on the show. I know there's so much more that we can talk about. And for all of you listening, please let us know. Please reach out to Pam. Please reach out to me. Let us know what you're taking away from today's chat. And additionally, I imagine you know people that could really benefit from listening in. So we would love for you to share this episode and let people know why they should tune in. So Thank you, Pam, for being here. Thanks to all of you for being here. We're so grateful for you, and we'll see you again next time. Bye for now.